In a packed federal courtroom, the voice of Tupac Shakur echoed through the speakers, raw, emotional, and unfiltered. It was a never-before-heard recording from a long-buried interview, allegedly suppressed for decades by Sean Diddy Combs himself. Now, amid a high-profile trial threatening to unravel Diddy's empire, the tape has resurfaced, and it could be the final nail in the coffin. Once dismissed as paranoid, Tupac now sounds prophetic. His words, recorded shortly before his death, paint a chilling picture of betrayal, manipulation, and power games within the music industry. At the center of that storm was Diddy. This trial isn't just about East Coast versus West Coast anymore. It's about a man who may have known he was being hunted and left behind a warning, just in case. Tupac foresaw what others ignored. Long before Cassie Ventura's damning testimony, before Monique stared down the industry and said no more, Tupac had already tried to pull back the curtain, and no one wanted to listen. Not because they didn't believe him, but because the truth he carried was too dangerous. It would have shattered the illusion too soon. It all began with a legendary interview. Tupac, 1996, Angie Martinez. 2 hours long, but only 10 minutes were ever released. Martinez claimed it was to avoid fueling the East Coast-West Coast feud, but now that story has been exposed as a lie. According to Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, it wasn't Angie's decision to suppress the tape. It was Diddy's. Let that sink in. Back then, Diddy wasn't just a rising star. He was a kingmaker with real influence. He allegedly had enough control to shape what the public saw and heard, even running Hot 97 from behind the scenes. He could kill stories before they breathed, erase voices before they echoed, including Tupac's. In that unreleased interview, Tupac wasn't just throwing jabs, he was issuing warnings. "I'm like a lightning rod," he said. "I'm attacking New York's finest, their self-proclaimed King of New York." He never said Diddy's name directly, but the implication was unmistakable. Tupac saw through it. The manipulation, the insecurity, the power not earned through respect, but extracted through silence. Every time it benefits New York, he represents New York. When it don't, now he's just another rapper, Pac said. But y'all let him wear your colors. These were not the words of a man fueling a rap beef. They were a whistleblower's plea disguised as commentary. Now, years later, inside a courtroom heavy with testimonies, sealed recordings, and names falling like dominoes, we're seeing the full scope of what Tupac tried to reveal. This isn't just the fall of a man, it's the collapse of a carefully built machine. The prosecution isn't just accusing Diddy of abuse, they're exposing infrastructure, a network of fear, NDAs, hush money, and power wielded like a weapon. Cassie Ventura's voice trembled, but her words cut deep. She described nights filled with cameras, rituals, and velvet-curtained hotel rooms. Her phone was taken, her choices erased. "You weren't invited into Diddy's world," she said. "You were absorbed into it." Then came Jean Deal. He wasn't a celebrity. He was the man who guarded the front door. Staring Diddy down, he declared, "You weren't protecting anything. You were hiding everything." Deal confirmed what many had whispered. Diddy had the full Angie Martinez tape. He heard it, and he buried it. Because in that tape, Tupac laid out a map to the truth, and Diddy knew that if the world heard it, his empire would burn. But perhaps the most unexpected moment came when Monique took the stand. She wasn't on the witness list. She wasn't even expected in the courtroom. But when she entered, the air shifted. She didn't arrive with rage. She brought facts, receipts, timelines, private audio. People weren't protecting Diddy because they believed him, she said. They were protecting their seats at the table, and Diddy was the head of it. She named names, powerful ones, Tyler Perry, Oprah, media executives. She didn't just accuse them of silence, she accused them of complicity. Looking directly at the jury, Monique said, "This trial was supposed to be about Cassie, and it was, but now it's so much more." But now, this trial isn't just about Sean Diddy Combs. It's about the entire ecosystem that allowed his alleged abuses to go unchecked. When Monique took the stand and called out the enablers, the judge didn't stop her. No one could. In that moment, it became bigger than Diddy. It was about a world that let someone like him become untouchable, protected by silence and power, while those who dared to speak were dismissed, punished, or erased. And Tupac Shakur, the first person they tried to silence, had seen it all coming. He used to take bullets for Diddy, figuratively, if not literally, but eventually turned his truth toward him. Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, walked into the courtroom like a man unburdening decades of secrets. He had stood behind Diddy during the heyday of Bad Boy Records. He'd seen the parties, the guests, and the unspoken rules. But now, he was done pretending. Taking the stand, he looked Diddy in the eye and said, "You remember what you told me back then? You said Tupac talks too much, and one day someone's going to shut him up. I didn't forget that." The courtroom went still. Gene wasn't trying to be dramatic. He was simply tired. He recounted how Diddy had ordered the Angie Martinez interview with Tupac to be buried, stating that nothing got past Diddy. Tupac's voice, he said, was too dangerous to be heard. According to Gene, Diddy's obsession with Pac wasn't just about competition. It was envy. He mimicked Pac's Versace style, chased the same women, and even copied his Grammy speeches line for line. Diddy didn't want to surpass Tupac. He wanted to be him. The most chilling part came when Gene talked about fear. He claimed Diddy's empire wasn't built on talent, but on surveillance, secrets, and control. He kept footage, paid people off, and knew exactly who to threaten and who to reward. Tupac had seen through it early. John recalled Pac saying, "Diddy might be playing with something dark." That moment, Gene said, changed everything. His voice cracked as he concluded, "They didn't just want Pac gone. They wanted what he stood for, gone." Silence fell again in the courtroom. Tupac never called himself a hero, but he had a habit of telling the truth before the world was ready to hear it. Behind the charisma was a man who studied everything: people, power, patterns. And one of the earliest patterns he identified was Diddy. Pac wasn't paranoid. He was observant. Suge Knight would later say that Tupac once told him, "Something ain't right about Puff. I don't know what it is yet, but it's coming." Tupac wasn't making accusations lightly. He did his homework. He started asking the questions. That made people nervous. He wasn't concerned with someone's sexuality. He was concerned with exploitation. He heard whispers about NDAs, dancers, and shady relationships, and he was ready to go public, not to shame anyone, but to protect vulnerable people. He told Suga, "Some of these dudes might be around somebody's child one day. If we know something, we got a duty to speak on it." But Tupac never got that chance. As he started connecting dots between Diddy, Uptown Records founder Andre Harrell, and a circle of young artists and dancers, the red flags multiplied. He believed Diddy wasn't just a manipulator. He was a gatekeeper for something much darker. This wasn't about rap beef or jealousy. Tupac saw a machine, a silence engine, and Diddy was driving it. People said Pac was spiraling, but they didn't realize he was one of the few trying to stop it. The tension in the courtroom rises. Every time someone brings up Quad Studios, a pivotal moment that changed everything. On November 30th, 1994, Tupac entered Quad Recording Studios in Manhattan for a late-night session. Minutes later, he was ambushed in the lobby, shot 5 times, and left for dead. He survived, but what haunted him wasn't the bullets. It was the betrayal. From his hospital bed, he was already certain it wasn't random. Someone knew he'd be there. Someone made sure the lights in the hallway were off. Someone wanted him silenced, but not dead. Not yet. And in Tupac's eyes, all roads led back to Bad Boy. It wasn't just a theory. It was the energy in the room afterward. The silence. The way Diddy and Biggie acted like nothing happened, even though they had been upstairs. They never called, never visited, just kept moving. And then Diddy released, "Who Shot Ya?" Pac didn't buy the excuse that it was recorded before the shooting. He heard a threat in it. "Stay quiet or next time, you won't survive." Years later, when Diddy would be asked about that night, he'd smile, dodge, and shrug. But Gene Deal testified that inside Bad Boy, People were whispering about the shooting almost immediately. Some even laughed. While Pac went to prison, Bad Boy soared, and death row faltered. Diddy's influence expanded. Tupac later said, "That moment taught me the game, the rules, the snakes." He never walked into another studio without watching every door. After Quad Studios, he understood that danger doesn't always come from your enemies. It comes from those closest to you. That night marked a shift. Diddy became not just a rival, but a suspect. You can't buy soul. You can't fake spirit. That's what Tupac had, and Diddy wanted it. Gene Deal called it obsession. He testified that Diddy studied Pac, his moves, his style, his charisma. What started as admiration turned into something darker. Diddy began copying Pac's look, his message, even his words. There's a story of Diddy quoting one of Pac's speeches verbatim at the Grammys. That wasn't flattery. It was theft. Then came Kim Porter. Rumor has it she admired Pac's fire and honesty, and Diddy didn't like that. Their relationship reportedly grew tense after she mentioned Tupac too often. But this wasn't about romance. It was about control. Pac saw it clearly. He once joked, "That man wants to be me so bad, he'll do anything, even hurt me." Behind the scenes, he wasn't laughing. He knew exactly what kind of man he was dealing with. That's what fans are wondering now. As courtroom testimonies continue painting Diddy not just as manipulative, but as strategic, obsessive, and calculating, Tupac's old words begin to make sense. Pac once said, "Diddy doesn't just want fame, he wants immortality, and he'll bury anyone to get it." And now, with evidence mounting, transcripts being read aloud, and long-silenced voices finally speaking out, one truth emerges. Tupac wasn't paranoid. He just saw the monster first. What haunts people most isn't what was said. It's what wasn't. Chief among the ghosts is the lost Angie Martinez interview with Tupac, a 2-hour conversation of legendary status in the hip-hop world, of which only 10 minutes were ever released. Everyone knew it happened. Everyone knew it was explosive, but almost nobody's heard it. And now, under courtroom pressure, the reason why is becoming clearer. When Angie spoke about the interview years later, she still sounded nervous. She said releasing it could have started a war, but her explanation never quite held up. Why would a journalist land the biggest interview of her career, alone, in hostile territory, only to bury it? Because, according to Jean Deal and other insiders, it wasn't her decision. It was Diddy's. The full tape wasn't shelved to protect the East Coast. It was shelved to protect him. Gene testified that Puffy was one of the only people who heard the full interview. He called it damaging and uncontrollable. One call to Hot 97 from Diddy, and the station folded. He didn't own the network, but he owned the fear. Angie even said, "I was literally afraid somebody would die if it aired." But that fear, what was it really about? What exactly did Tupac say? Insiders who claim to have heard unreleased portions of the tape say Pac went all in. He accused Diddy of orchestrating a culture of silence and said he was the face of something far darker than the East vs. West beef. He spoke about people being paid to disappear, about setups masked as street beef, and about how Diddy was playing chess while everyone else thought they were just battling. Pac warned that the rap game was being hijacked, not by artists, but by puppet masters who didn't care about music, only control. He said Diddy was more politician than performer, more cult leader than mogul. The most chilling quote, according to those who've heard it, was, "He doesn't just want you to follow him, he wants to own your voice." And now, decades later, it's clearer than ever why that tape never surfaced. Had it been released, the East Coast versus West Coast narrative might have collapsed under the weight of something much bigger, something institutional. Now, as names are dragged into the light and long-buried stories resurface, the world is asking, where is that tape? Who still has it? And what else did Tupac try to warn us about before it was too late? Because when the full truth finally comes out, it may not just shake the industry, it might burn it down. There's a reason the streets listened to Tupac. It wasn't just the lyrics, it was the vision. He didn't just speak truth to power, he studied it. And before his death, he had started speaking about something larger than any rap feud or record label. something no other artist dared say, out loud. That black music was being used as a weapon. Pac had begun connecting dots most artists didn't even see. He spoke about how the same corporations that owned record labels also owned private prisons, and how the lyrics being promoted weren't just entertainment, they were bait. Follow this life, Pac said, and you follow it right into a cage. Looking back, he wasn't wrong. In interviews, he said, "They'll give you money to rap about killing your brother, selling drugs to your own people, and being proud of it. But try to rap about uplifting your people, and suddenly the budget's gone." Now, flash forward to the Diddy trial, and this theory no longer sounds paranoid. Prosecutors are uncovering that Diddy's empire may have been more than just vanity. It may have been a pipeline, a network of parties, contracts, NDAs, and manipulation. Not just scandal, but design. A machine that filtered who got to speak, who had to stay silent, and who disappeared. Even Will Smith's testimony echoed the same theme. He said he didn't feel like he'd been welcomed into a world. He felt initiated. A guest at first, a prisoner by the end. Others are now saying the same. Monique, according to courtroom insiders, hinted that Diddy wasn't just protecting himself. He was protecting people even higher up. Executives, politicians, media moguls. The ones who don't get their hands dirty, but always keep them deep in the money. Tupac tried to tell us, Diddy wasn't the final boss. He was just the gatekeeper. The architects were behind the glass. And Pac allegedly said, "When you trace the money, it doesn't end at Bad Boy. It ends in the boardroom."